50 million eyes, one hand on the Bible. Ivanka Trump swore to defend her truth, but Jasmine Crockett exposed something that ripped it all apart. In seconds, careers crumble, faith cracks, and America stops breathing. What truth could end Ivanka Trump's world? Stay with us, this is a story worth every second of your time. The lights inside Congress blazed like a trial before heaven. The microphones snapped with sharp clicks, each one louder than a heartbeat. It didn't feel like politics anymore. It felt like Judgment Day. The doors opened. Ivanka Trump entered, glowing in pure white chin-high eyes, cold like a saint carved from ice. Every step echoed power and perfection. But across the table, Jasmine Crockett waited calm and fierce, her hand resting on a thick folder like a loaded weapon. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the air. In 2017, you placed your hand on the Bible before the nation and before God, swearing truth and service. Today I ask, did you betray that oath? The chamber froze. Even the cameras stopped breathing. The chamber lights stayed, blinding the air sharp with silence. Then the massive screen flickered on. Footage filled the wall. Ivanka Trump in her white suit, one hand resting on the Bible, voice smooth and composed. Faith has always guided me. The room seemed to hold its breath. Cameras zoomed in on her calm face, frozen in devotion. Then Jasmine leaned forward. Let's roll the next clip. The lights dimmed. A second video crackled to life, backstage footage from 2016. Ivanka laughed with her advisor, her tone cold, deliberate. The Bible is just a prop. It adds a holy touch. The media loves that. Business is what matters. The moment the words dropped, the chamber exploded. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed like gunfire, senators muttered in disbelief. The sound was chaos, raw and electric. Ivanka slammed her hand on the desk, voice breaking through the noise. Enough! This is a vile fabrication. You manufactured this to destroy me. She turned sharply toward the chairman, her fury unrestrained. Why is Congress allowing this circus? This is an attack on my faith, on everything I stand for. But Jasmine didn't blink. She rose slowly, placing a timeline chart on the table. Her voice was clear, almost surgical. Each time you said, because of faith, a PR deal followed within days. Here, she tapped one date. March 2019, you spoke at the Faith in Business Forum. 2 days later, your company signed a $2 million perfume endorsement. She turned another page. July 2020. You told an audience that prayer guided your leadership. 3 days later, you launched the Grace Collection jewelry line. She looked straight at Ivanka. You call that faith? Ivanka laughed bitterly, tilting her head back. Commerce doesn't conflict with faith, she shot back. God gave me talent to build. My success honors him. Her tone rose, half defiant, half desperate. Jasmine didn't move, her silence more cutting than words. The tension thickened, the two women locked in a battle of conviction and calculation. Reporters whispered, phones streamed, live viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was belief on trial. Ivanka's fury blazed. Jasmine's calm cut through it like steel. The clash felt biblical, each word striking like thunder. Jasmine leaned into the mic, her gaze straight into the camera. Her voice dropped to a quiet, haunting edge. If you think this is the peak, wait for what comes next. The next evidence will shake the very core of faith itself. And with that, the room plunged into stunned silence, every camera still rolling, every heart pounding. The echoes of Jasmine's last words still hung in the air when the chairman slammed his gavel again and again. Order, maintain order, he barked, but the tension refused to die. Cameras trembled as flashes burst like lightning. The room was a battlefield wrapped in silence and noise all at once. Ivanka took a deep breath, her fury cooling into something smoother, more calculated. She changed her tone, soft, trembling, almost tearful. My children and I go to church every Sunday, she began, voice gentle as silk. We read the Bible together at night. We pray before every meal. Faith is what keeps my family grounded. The chamber quieted. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Her words painted the image of a perfect believer, a mother touched by grace. Reporters scribbled the air, filled with an uneasy calm. But Jasmine didn't move. Her eyes cut through the quiet like a blade. Then softly but firmly she spoke. Faith is not an Instagram photo. It's real life. The words hit harder than any shout. Ivanka's smile froze color draining from her face. She snapped back her voice, rising, trembling with rage. And what do you know about faith? You use religion to attack me. You have no right to judge my spiritual life. The silence that followed was deafening. You could almost hear the nation breathing through the cameras. On TV screens across America, viewers sat frozen watching two visions of belief collide, one crafted for the spotlight, the other forged in truth. The chamber lights flickered like the moment before a storm. Jasmine's eyes shifted toward the door. Her voice dropped to a whisper only the microphones could catch. If Mrs. Ivanka thinks she can hide behind words, she said, let's see how she reacts when the witness walks in. The tension still burned from Ivanka's last outburst when the chairman's gavel cracked 3 times. Reverend Samuel Price, please take the stand. The heavy doors opened. A tall man in a black clerical suit walked in, Bible pressed to his chest. The room fell silent. Even the cameras dimmed their red lights. He moved with the calm gravity of someone used to speaking before heaven. Taking his seat, he adjusted his glasses and began softly, I met Ms. Ivanka Trump at the White House in 2018. I advised her to place ethics above profit. His next words landed like thunder. She told me, God will understand. Business must come first. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, camera flashes, chaos. Lawmakers leaned forward. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones buzzed. The chairman hammered his gavel again, but no one heard it. All eyes swung to Ivanka. Her face turned crimson, lips trembling before she exploded. She shot to her feet, slamming both palms on the table. You liar, she screamed, pointing at Reverend Price. You're twisting God's name to destroy me. You have no right to speak for him. Her voice shook with fury, rising higher, trying to drown the noise that surrounded her. Reverend Price didn't flinch. He simply folded his hands, eyes steady, unmoved by her rage. The crowd watched her unravel her control, cracking under the weight of his calm. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, voice clear and unwavering. This is no longer politics, she said. This is about truth before God and before the nation. The words hit the air like steel. Ivanka's face hardened, tears of anger glinting in her eyes. This entire hearing is a setup, she shouted. A theater to destroy me and my family. You'll all answer to God for this. Her voice echoed across the chamber, sharp and wild. The air felt heavy like thunder about to strike. Jasmine stood motionless, then leaned toward the microphone, her tone low but piercing. You think this testimony is shocking? She said, eyes glinting under the white lights. Wait until you see the next piece of evidence, where every lie collapses with just one page. The chamber froze again. For a heartbeat, even the cameras seemed afraid to move. Ivanka dabbed the sweat at her temple, took a long drink of water, and forced her breath into even beats. The calm never reached her eyes. They flashed with heat, sharp and unblinking. She leaned into the mic, lips curling into a hard smile, and spoke in a low, steady whisper, You will not bring me down. The words bled through the speakers like a dare. The chamber listened, spellbound to a woman refusing to yield. At home, millions watched the close-ups that told a different story. The immaculate poise was gone. In its place, a frantic kind of defiance fought to hold the center. Producers slowed the replay of her hands shaking, then clenching, then smoothing nothing at all. Commentators murmured that this wasn't strategy. It was survival. You could feel it through the screen. Ivanka wasn't defending belief. She was barricading herself against it. Every second stretched like wire pulled tight. On the dais, lawmakers bent toward one another, voices barely above breath. We have never seen anyone react this violently when faith is touched. One whispered, eyes never leaving the witness table. Another nodded as if admitting a truth he'd tried not to see. The chairman's gavel hovered, unsure whether to strike or let the silence speak. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She just watched, steady as a metronome measuring the last beats of a performance. Then with calm finality, she opened her thick folder and raised a single sheet. Her voice was firm, clear, impossible to talk over. One single detail. We'll end this entire performance. Silence from the last promise hung like a blade. Then Jasmine lifted a single page to the mic. She squared her shoulders, eyes steady, and read in a clear voice, Faith cannot stop profit. If necessary, we can borrow the Bible as a media launchpad. The words hung in white light, heavy and simple, a fuse burning straight to the heart of the room. A wave went through the crowd, sharp breaths, squeaking chairs, cameras punching air with flashes. Jasmine held the page up to the lenses, the seal and margin notes visible, and waited for the echo. Ivanka's chair screeched back as she lunged to her feet, color blazing in her cheeks. She slammed the microphone, the thud booming from every speaker, and screamed, "Fake! The letter is fake! I will sue you to the end!" She shoved her chair aside like a barrier she had to break, shoulders tight, as if ready to walk out. The chairman pounded his gavel, but the blows drowned beneath the roar of voices and the shriek of shutters. The handwriting expert stepped forward, calm as stone, carrying a slim case and a magnifier. He set the page beneath a light, tracing loops, pressure marks, and the signature's long tail for the cameras. He spoke without tremor, each syllable measured. "The handwriting is exactly Ivanka Trump's." He turned to the screen, overlaying comparison samples, the same slant, the same lift at the crossbar, the same rhythm of strokes. A hush rolled across the chamber, the kind that forces truth to stand alone. Reporters lowered their phones, realizing there was nothing left to spin except the line itself. Ivanka didn't move. Her eyes reddened as though heat had licked across glass, and her hands started to shake. Her breath grew shallow, shoulders rising, then falling, then rising again without control. The cameras caught the tremor at her jaw, the gloss at her lashes, the split-second plea that flickered and died. Around her, sound vanished. Even the lights felt louder than the room. She stood there, stunned and wavering, while the single page in Jasmine's hand finished what all the shouting could not. On the giant monitors, the page filled the frame, ink strokes dark and steady. The boom mics caught the paper's whisper as Jasmine lowered it, slow and deliberate. Somewhere a clock ticked, marking the end of something no one could name. The chairman's gavel hovered uncertain, then fell once, a dull note swallowed by the carpet. No one clapped. The moment did not ask for noise, it only asked to be seen clearly. Across the country, living rooms went still as a single frame froze on screens. Producers leaned forward, hands over switches, unwilling to cut away. In the gallery, a veteran pressed his cap to his chest and stared at the page like a verdict. Jasmine said nothing. She didn't need to. The letter, the line, the confirmation, together, they rang like a final bell. And Ivanka, trembling, could only face the silence that followed. The last echo of the handwriting confirmation still vibrated in the lights when Ivanka finally found her voice. She gripped the edge of the table, knuckles, whitening, breath catching like a stalled engine. Her gaze flashed from the page to the cameras, then to the crowd, as if hunting for a door that wasn't there. The mask of control slid inch by inch, revealing raw panic beneath polish. When the words burst out, they tore through the hush. "No one understands the pressure I carry. I only wanted to protect my family." Gasps rustled across the gallery like wind moving through dry leaves. The microphones picked up the tremor in her breath, the crack in each syllable, the plea baked into fury. She straightened as if willing dignity back into her spine, but her hands betrayed her, shaking, then still, then shaking again. Cameras tightened on the small betrayals, a bitten lip, a blinking storm, a throat working too hard. "No one understands the pressure I carry. I only wanted to protect my family," she shouted again, and the line, desperate, human, undeniable, rang against the letter, still glowing on the screens. Jasmine did not rise. She sat tall, shoulders squared, the thick folder closed before her like a sealed verdict. When she leaned to the mic, the room stilled as if the oxygen itself listened. Her tone was clean and final, a blade that did not need to shout. "Pressure never justifies betraying faith. You betrayed not only the people, but also God." The words hung in the chamber with the cold certainty of a bell that cannot be unheard. Ivanka's knees seemed to forget their purpose. She sank into her chair as though the weight she named finally found her. Her hair slipped forward, a pale curtain over a face that had carried too many portraits, too many poses. The power that once entered rooms ahead of her evaporated into the hot glare of the lights. Her shoulders hitched, then stilled, and the microphones caught only the smallest sound air, leaving a story that could no longer stand. Across from her, Jasmine remained, upright, eyes bright and unblinking, the living opposite of collapse. The contrast filled the frame, one woman bowing to the burden of what she'd done, the other refusing to bend at all. The echo of the gavel still lingered when the world erupted. Within hours, headlines flashed across every major news network. CNN blared Ivanka Trump and the oath betrayed. The New York Times printed it in bold across the front page. The BBC called it America's crisis of faith. Even magazines that once celebrated her style now displayed her tear-streaked face beneath a stark headline, The Fall of the Faithful. The image of Ivanka collapsing in the hearing room flooded television screens from New York to London, from Rome to Seoul. What began as a congressional testimony had become a global spectacle of moral collapse. In diners, small-town living rooms, and retirement homes, older Americans gathered around their televisions. Some watched in disbelief, others with quiet rage. A retired veteran in Kansas shook his head and muttered, "You betray the Bible, you betray the country." In Alabama, an elderly woman clasped her hands and whispered, "It wasn't just a lie, it was a sin against the nation." Across the country, that sentence repeated itself as if everyone had agreed on the same verdict. Talk radio buzzed with callers quoting scripture, their voices trembling with both anger and sorrow. What had been a scandal of politics now felt like a wound to America's soul. Religious communities reacted with speed and fury. Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, and Lutheran leaders usually split by theology released statements within hours. The National Council of Churches wrote, "Faith cannot be staged. When sacred words are used as props, they lose no power, but the person who misuses them loses their soul." In churches that Sunday, pastors tore up old sermons to write new ones. Congregations stood in silence before prayer. The mood was not vengeance, it was grief. They mourned the idea that the Bible could ever be reduced to a marketing tool. From pulpits to pews, the message was the same: faith is not a costume. Television networks captured the uproar in real time. Conservative channels tried to frame the moment as persecution. "Everyone sins," one host said. "She's being hunted by the left." But other stations replayed the 2016 video on loop, Ivanka's voice saying calmly, "The Bible is just a prop." The phrase echoed through homes, classrooms, and subway speakers. Nightly talk shows mocked the line comedians, mimicking her posture, her tone, her collapse. On one show, an actor knelt before a stack of shopping catalogs and declared, "God will understand profit first." The audience laughed, but behind the laughter was something colder: disappointment, even shame. America wasn't mocking her for falling. It was mourning what she had dragged down with her. In Congress, the shockwave fractured alliances. Republican lawmakers argued behind closed doors, some defending her, others demanding distance. One senator slammed his fist on the table, saying, "You can survive scandal. You can't survive blasphemy." Another, pale and shaken, whispered that Jasmine Crockett had done what no prosecutor could. She had turned faith itself into the witness. Leaked recordings from those meetings revealed shouting resignations and a fear deeper than political damage, fear of being on the wrong side of a moral awakening. By Sunday morning, news drones hovered above Washington National Cathedral, capturing a sea of candlelight. Thousands stood beneath banners reading "Truth above power" and "Faith is not for sale." Across the Midwest and South, pastors organized marches calling for honesty before holiness. In Ohio, a small-town preacher told his congregation, "We were taught to turn the other cheek, but we were never told to turn our faith into an advertisement." The clip went viral within hours, replayed on every major morning show. America was not just reacting, it was reckoning. In cafes and barbershops, conversations turned heated. "She thought she could market belief like perfume," one man said, gesturing at the screen. But belief fights back. College students debated whether the hearing marked the end of celebrity politics. Taxi drivers, waitresses, factory workers all had an opinion. Everyone had watched Jasmine's composure, her unshakable calm in the face of power. The moment Jasmine said pressure never justifies betraying faith, it became the quote of the decade. It appeared on T-shirts, church billboards, protest signs, even graffiti on subway walls. The country had found a sentence that sounded like judgment and redemption in one breath. Around the world, the story grew into a mirror of America's contradictions. In London, The Guardian ran the headline, "Ivanka from first daughter to fallen disciple." In France, Le Monde described her as "une icône brisée de la foi moderne," a broken icon of modern faith. In Italy, newspapers compared the scandal to the fall of ancient political dynasties. The Vatican issued a short statement urging prayers for those who mistake devotion for publicity. Even in nations that rarely commented on American politics, the story dominated prime time. In Germany, a professor of ethics called it a parable of the Western soul. The entire world seemed to agree that something sacred had been lost in Washington. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's name rose like a tide. Editorials called her the moral compass of Congress. Newspapers printed still frames of her final words beside the image of Ivanka's collapse. She became the quiet opposite of everything that had just fallen apart, a living reminder that integrity could survive fame. At rallies, people carried signs that read, "Jasmine spoke for us." University classes dissected her speech for rhetoric, theology, and courage. Political scientists said she had redrawn the line between public service and moral service. Even critics who once dismissed her as too idealistic now admitted she had become something America hadn't seen in decades, a politician who told the truth when it cost the most. By the end of the week, the event had a name, the Faithful Hearing. News specials replayed it as if it were a national tragedy, a morality play written in real time. Commentators compared it to Watergate, to the Scopes trial, even to the televised confessions of ancient scandals. But this time, the wound wasn't about power or money. It was about belief, what it means to swear an oath and mean it. In homes across the world, people replayed the footage one last time before bed. Jasmine steady Ivanka, trembling the single line of handwriting that ended an empire of image. And when the lights went out, America was left with a truth as clear as Scripture itself: faith is not a tool. When it is used for gain, it turns on its master. And when it is betrayed, it does not forgive, it exposes. Jasmine Crockett stood as the quiet proof that conviction can outshine spectacle. In the ruins of Ivanka's fall, the nation rediscovered something it had forgotten, that belief once stripped of performance still has power enough to shake the world. The echo of that gavel still haunted Washington. When the Faithful Hearing ended, the city exhaled like a battlefield after smoke. The crowds outside the Capitol thinned, the cameras packed up, and the headlines moved on. But the echo, Jasmine Crockett's final words, kept replaying across every television, every pulpit, every classroom. It was no longer just a political scandal. It had become a reckoning. Ivanka Trump's empire collapsed faster than anyone imagined. Her scheduled book tour was canceled. Her foundation's website quietly vanished from the internet. Invitations to elite galas disappeared overnight. Even her most loyal allies, donors, strategists, and media hosts began to distance themselves. One by one, they issued statements about reflection and redemption, all careful not to use her name. By the end of the month, political analysts spoke plainly: Ivanka Trump is finished. The phrase spread like wildfire. She was removed from every committee list and stripped from future campaign plans. Potential allies called it strategic distancing, but everyone knew what it meant: political exile. Even within her own party, she had become radioactive. A senator whispered to reporters, "You can survive scandal, but you can't survive sacrilege." That line made the evening news. Across the country, schools and universities began using the Faithful Hearing as a moral study. In civics classes, students watched the footage the moment Jasmine read the letter aloud, the trembling silence that followed Ivanka's collapse beneath the lights. Professors paused the video before the gavel fell and asked the same question: what happens when image replaces integrity? Students debated. Some defended Ivanka, arguing she had been crushed by impossible expectations. Others saw the hearing as a warning that truth always collects its due, no matter how late it arrives. At Harvard's Kennedy School, a new course opened the following semester: Faith, Power, and Public Trust Lessons from the Faithful Hearing. The lecture hall filled beyond capacity. A political ethics professor summed it up simply: she forgot that faith isn't a performance, it's a promise. That quote appeared in newspapers nationwide. Churches followed soon after. Sunday sermons across America turned the hearing into modern parable. From Texas to New York, pastors spoke of it as the day belief defended itself. One pastor told his congregation she used the Bible as a mirror when it was meant to be a compass. Congregants murmured, "Amen." In Sunday school, children learned about sincerity through that story, their teachers explaining how even beauty and privilege mean nothing when truth is betrayed. The hearing wasn't a scandal anymore, it had become scripture. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's name began to appear in unexpected places. Textbooks listed her beside figures like Thurgood Marshall and Shirley Chisholm. Documentaries called her the voice of conscience in a cynical age. She refused the spotlight, but it followed her anyway. University walls carried her quote in gold letters: "Power can hide truth for a moment, but never forever." Schools used it in ethics exams. Churches printed it on banners. It became the modern American creed. In 2030, the Department of Education approved a new high school curriculum titled Moments That Define Democracy. The Faithful Hearing was Chapter 10. The accompanying essay described Jasmine as the congresswoman who restored moral gravity to the word oath. Students read the line aloud during debate practice, each syllable sharp and reverent. Teachers said it reminded them why truth still mattered. Outside academia, cultural institutions carried the legacy further. The Smithsonian curated an exhibit called Truth on Trial. Inside a glass case sat Jasmine's red folder, the same one that had ended Ivanka's empire. The placard read, "Evidence used in the Faithful Hearing 2025. A nation confronted itself. Visitors stood in silence. Some prayed. Others stared at the folder as though it still radiated light. Across from it hung a still photo of Ivanka, head-bowed hair covering her face. Beneath it were just 3 words: the price of pretending. By contrast, Ivanka lived in quiet exile. Her once lavish presence faded into absence. She closed her companies and sold her Manhattan apartment. She retreated to a private estate by the sea, rarely seen in public. Paparazzi occasionally captured her, walking alone along the shore, face hidden under a hat, her phone pressed to her ear, as if trying to rewrite the past one call at a time. No one picked up. When asked for comment, her representatives declined. One journalist wrote, "She's not just fallen, she's vanished into her own myth." Internationally, her name became shorthand for moral collapse. In France, the press called her La fille du serment brisé, the daughter of the broken oath. In Germany, commentators compared her to historical figures who mistook image for truth. Even in countries far removed from American politics, her story became a cautionary tale for leaders who thought faith could be faked. The global consensus was clear: some failures are so public they become permanent. Meanwhile, Jasmine rose from symbol to legacy. She remained in Congress, but she transcended politics. Journalists described her as the conscience of Washington. She was invited to lecture at universities and speak at interfaith gatherings. In one memorable address at Howard University, she told graduates, "Faith without honesty is just theater, and power without humility always ends in tragedy." The audience rose in thunderous applause. That line, too, found its way into history books. Her influence reached even those who once opposed her. A conservative columnist wrote, "I didn't agree with her politics, but I can't deny her purity of purpose." She reminded us that belief isn't supposed to be comfortable, it's supposed to be true. It was a rare confession in a polarized time, and it showed how far her message had traveled. As years passed, the Faithful Hearing became a cultural reference point. Filmmakers, playwrights, and authors adapted it into art. A best-selling novel retold the story from the perspective of a journalist who witnessed the collapse. A Broadway play called Oathfire dramatized the confrontation, ending with Jasmine's line, "You betrayed not just the people, but God." Audiences wept during curtain calls. Critics called it a morality play for the digital century. In museums, Jasmine's portrait hung opposite a shadowed image of Ivanka, a visual balance between truth and illusion. School children on field trips stood between the two, silent as teachers explained the moment America remembered the cost of false devotion. In one essay contest, a 12-year-old from Michigan wrote, "Jasmine Crockett proved that truth doesn't need beauty to shine, it only needs courage." That essay went viral, reminding the nation that even a child understood what power sometimes forgets. Ivanka's legacy, on the other hand, hardened into warning. Every political science textbook included her name as a symbol of lost credibility. Scholars called it the Faithful Effect, the irreversible collapse of trust when sacred imagery is used for personal gain. Future candidates studied the case as a cautionary tale on authenticity. Advisors told them, "Swear the oath only if you mean it. Otherwise, it will come for you too." By the 10th anniversary of the hearing, both women's fates had become legend. Ivanka remained silent, her image frozen in that moment of defeat. Jasmine, still serving in Congress, had become a beacon for reform. Under her influence, a bipartisan bill on transparency and campaign ethics passed with overwhelming support. Reporters called it the ripple of redemption. And yet, beneath all the analysis and headlines, the story endured for one reason: it reminded people that morality still mattered. In an age of curated lives and filtered truth, the faithful hearing stood as proof that reality could still break through the illusion. That faith, when twisted, could become its own revenge. The story's moral was now printed on church bulletins, quoted in graduations, engraved on memorial plaques. No one can turn religion into a prop. Power can conceal for a season, but truth will always find light. Those words were no longer just Jasmine's, they belonged to the nation. As the final documentary of the decade aired, its closing sequence mirrored the ending of that fateful day. The screen filled with the marble halls of Congress empty, now bathed in white light. A narrator's voice carried through the silence, calm and measured, echoing across time. In the history of the United States, there are days when Congress does more than judge laws. It judges the human soul. On that day, Jasmine Crockett forced Ivanka Trump to confront the betrayal beating in her own heart. The camera pans slowly toward Jasmine's chair, empty now, but haloed by the afternoon sun pouring through the high windows. The music swelled, neither mournful nor triumphant, but eternal. The image lingered, suspended between memory and myth. When the screen faded to black, a final line appeared in white letters: "Truth has no audience, it only has witnesses." And with that, the world understood why the faithful hearing would never fade from history. It wasn't just the fall of a woman or the rise of another. It was the day America rediscovered its conscience, and the world remembered that faith once betrayed becomes the judge no power can escape. Thank you for watching until this moment, and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.